Support for this podcast comes from SmarterQ. Scheduling social posts with SmarterQ increases your efficiency and boosts your engagement, enabling you to have such a positive impact on your online relationships, which honestly are real relationships with real humans that need to be nurtured. Head to humanamplified.com/smarterq to sign up for a 30-day free trial, no strings attached. I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. We're on a mission to revamp society by amplifying your humanity. This week on the show...
Hi, my name is Ron Karr. I'm a son of a father who was escaping the Holocaust. I survived it with my optimism because I knew that there had to be a better day tomorrow. It's the only thing you can live for. We all live for hope. I'm talking about authentically sharing your story. It doesn't take two to change a relationship or a conversation. It only takes one. If you don't like the reaction, change the action. What are you going to do differently? Sometimes to gain velocity, you need to pause.
February is here, and it's time to start thinking about relationships with ourselves and others. When we get right down to it, honing the interpersonal skills needed to grow any type of relationship involves intentional focus. Just how much and what type oftentimes depends on what we've been through in our lives. Last week on the show, we learned all about spiritual awakening and how it's so highly intertwined with healing trauma. So today on the show, we'll be looking at how one man's trauma healing has led not only to a highly successful career in helping others be successful in theirs, but also has led to insight into creating safe spaces and better conversations in personal relationships. We're talking with Ron Karr, a highly sought-after public speaker, former president of the National Speakers Association, sales and leadership success consultant, and author of 5 books. His newest book is called The Velocity Mindset, where he teaches us how to combine speed with direction to change our lives. Living in Florida by way of New Jersey, Ron is also a doting dad and loves to play golf. Ron not only knows what it takes to improve sales and guides CEOs in large business groups, but his unique vantage point is so interesting because the root of sales success is relationships. In this episode, Ron combines his professional expertise with lessons learned from his personal history of being the son of a Holocaust survivor and navigating that relational and generational trauma to help us improve our relationships through trust, dependability, transparency and communication, and service. Whether you're interested in growing in your career or your personal relationships, from this episode you'll learn how the mind and body are connected, the importance of honoring your word, actionable steps for what to do when something comes up and you can't honor your word, the hormones of trust that lead to productive engagement, how to know if you have a victim mentality, how to get out of a victim mentality, and how to be the bigger person, that is, the leader, to start changing outcomes in your life, especially when other people are involved. For all the links mentioned throughout this episode, and especially the link to Ron's latest book, The Velocity Mindset, check out the show notes at humanamplified.com/episodes/085. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Brandy. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Very, very good. So can you please introduce yourself to our listeners, just who you are, what you do?
So my name is Ron Karr. I'm a professional speaker, consultant, and an expert in the area of sales and leadership. I've written 5 books. My last book is called The Velocity Mindset. And I've been doing this for about 35 years. I'm past president of the National Speakers Association. And when I'm not doing this, I have a 27-year-old daughter who's the light of my life. And I play golf, although badly at times. And I keep myself busy.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about your time at the National Speakers Association. That sounds really interesting.
Yes, I've been a member since 1991. So I guess that's about 30 years. No, 30 plus years. Anyway, it's been great. You know, I started in the New York chapter, went to national. I was a past president of New York in 94, 95. I was elected vice president, which is a 4-year gig to get to president, then immediate past president. And that was in 2011, I gave up the gavel in 2014 in June. And, it's not my involvement that was the only benefit of NSA. I was involved because I wanted to be, but it was what I got out of being involved.
Okay.
You're not looking for anything, but people get to know you. They get to know what you do, what you stand for, how well you do it. And then they refer you sometimes to other people. But it's what I learned in the association that's the most valuable.
Okay.
It is the ideas I got and how to tackle certain situations and make me a better speaker, learn how to market it. And at the end of the day, basically just make me a better human being and learn how to be of value to my clients.
Okay. Does being a better speaker help you be a better human being?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
There are people that speak that do wonderful, wonderful performances on stage. But then when you see them lead their lives, it's contradiction to what they would tell you on stage. And to me, that's not an appropriate way of handling your life. You should be on stage who you are in real life.
Yeah. We're going to scratch the surface of some deep topics in this episode, and we're going to talk about building trust and ditching victim mentalities. I know that you have a little experience or expertise in those areas, but before we dive into that, I want to get really personal, and I just want to start from the beginning and learn about your life story. I know that's big, but can you just take us through your life and let us know who Ron Karr is?
Well, I guess if anybody had a right to talk about being part of a victim mentality and getting over it, it's me, because I'm not the only one who's lived through this, but I'm a son of a father who was escaping the Holocaust and wound up in a camp in Siberia, the Russians, for 2 years. So between getting shot and being threatened death on a daily basis, and a horrible way to exist, it's been documented that children of Holocaust survivors tend to live an abused childhood. And the reason, to make it simple, is it's not that people who were in the Holocaust, don't care or love the kids. My father loved me deeply. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
It's just that they're so damaged emotionally, and they want to do whatever it will take to ensure that you do not live the life that they had. They overcompensate by being very restrictive, being very demanding. And if you do something wrong, just the littlest of thing, their reactions can be rather harsh, whether it's verbally or physically, not sexually, but
Yeah.
throwing things at you or whatever. So when you have a good moment, then all of a sudden it's destroyed because something stupid happens. And then my father would fly into a rage and throw things and say things he never would say to a kid. That's PTSD right there. I mean, plain and simple. You're living and then you never know when the bomb's going to drop. And then you are looking for all the bombs to drop. But what it also did was it also honed my skill that makes me extremely valuable to my clients today. Because one of my skills is I can think 5 steps ahead, because I was 5 steps ahead of my father trying to avoid getting the crap beaten out of me. How's he going to respond to this? What's going to be the response, and so forth.
Yeah.
So that became, like anything else, a strength, but if it's overused, it becomes a weakness. But for me, it was a strength for my clients. But in my life, it became overused and a weakness for me, because that led to the, not the victim mentality at that moment, but it led to me always being on guard and never being able to relax or take people for who they are, because I always was waiting for that shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Is that making sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense.
So when I got out of the house and went to college, I was the most unconfident person you'll ever meet. And it took me a few years after college to start getting my confidence wings, if you will.
Yeah.
It took me a few years to work through this stuff. And I had a few physical elements that I know came from the stress of what I lived through and what I was living through. Now, how did I survive it? I survived it with my optimism, because I knew that there had to be a better day tomorrow. It's the only thing you can live for. We all live for hope. Everybody, no matter how good your life is, how bad your life is, we all live for hope that tomorrow's a better day.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps us going. As a matter of fact, any speaker that goes on stage, if you're really honest about what your role is to provide hope for everybody in that audience that they can do something better, that they can overcome a situation or get to where they want to be. We sell hope.
Yeah.
Now, when I say sell, some people have a bad connotation. So I'm talking about authentically sharing your story
Yeah.
that leads people to realizing, hey, I can do that. There's a better way of doing it. I want to do it.
Yeah. Wow. I just want to let our audience know that I didn't know that was your story. And thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's really helpful. One of the things you said that really resonated was that you can think 5 steps ahead, and also that a strength, if overused, becomes a weakness. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah. So when you're thinking 5 steps ahead, you're thinking about what could go wrong, how can the person respond, and what. And that's a very good thing to do in strategic thinking and looking at a new initiative for clients or whatever, or for a salesperson preparing for a sales call.
Hmm.
But if it's overused and you keep thinking over and over, then you're overthinking it and you tend to complicate things. That's what I mean.
Okay. So I do know that you went through a series of 9 back surgeries.
Mhm.
What happened and what was that experience like for you?
Well, number one, I think my back surgeries came as a result of what I went through as a young child.
Okay. The stress or the from physical?
Well, it's a little deeper than that. I write about it because in the velocity mindset, I address it. And just to let your audience know simply is that Tiger Woods had 1 level fused. I have 9 levels fused. So that's what all those back surgeries were about. So a friend of mine said after the third back surgery, read this book called Healing Back Pain, John Sarno, Sarno. And he was a pain med doc at NYU in the 80s. And he couldn't understand, why am I giving Vicodin and these people are not getting better? Well, he started researching the brain. And what he found out was is that when we get close to the subconscious, and there's things in our subconscious that all of us don't want to get to,
Hmm.
our brain will create pain in the body
Mm.
as a diversion. Make it a simple thing. And up to the 1980s, the number one malady, Brandy, was ulcers. But then they came out with a pill that basically solved it. So then the back became the major pain malady in the body,
Okay.
and it became a thing that many millions of people have been dealing with. And so he developed this TMI program where he helped people just realize that, and walk them through a couple of exercises when they recognized what was happening and how it was happening. For many of them, the pain went away because they were now addressing it. Okay. In the book, he writes that there's certain things that can lead to that. He found out a couple of them were everybody's need of perfectionism, and you can't live up to standards of perfectionism. So, but perfectionism is really hiding something else that's bothering you.
Mm.
And another thing he called was goodism. Goodism was, I'll give you an example. When I was not getting a lot of love or appreciation for what I was doing right at home, my mother was a tremendous, I mean, she was my rock. She was my mentor. She was a woman ahead of her time. She fought in the War of Independence for Israel, commanded a battalion of 2,000 women, world-renowned economist, but basically she was traveling her whole life.
Hmm.
So she wasn't there during the pain. But when they were together, I would practice goodism because I do whatever I can to get the attaboys. I
Mm.
was starving for it. So I wash the dishes every night. I do this. That's goodism. Okay.
Okay.
And I still have it to this day, but it doesn't serve me well sometimes. Sometimes it does. So I'm more cognizant of it so that I can let it serve me the best it can and do well for people. But people with goodism, at the end of the day, if they do too much for others and disregard themselves, they're not in a good position.
Gotcha. Okay. Did the back surgeries, did they contribute to your healing process from, I guess, the pain that was there?
Yeah, so I didn't, because when you do MRIs of backs, I mean, the surgeon would say, well, these are not that great, but I've seen people who are worse with no pain. That's what he's talking about. He's saying, why is it so different?
Hmm.
So at the end of the day, the back surgeries did help me. Yes, I got my life back and I was able to work, but I think I may not have needed them if I was on to John Sono's work earlier in life.
Okay. Let's shift a little bit. When I say the word trust, what comes up for you?
So trust to me is earned, and trust is the gold standard to me. So the way I explain it to people is, God forbid if you lose your husband or wife, if you lose your kids, and I'm not talking about death. If something happens, there's an old, talking to them or whatever, they're gone, living someplace else,
Hmm.
the relationship's gone, you lose your house, you lose all your money. Those are not good things necessarily, but you know one thing, you can always come back from all of that, assuming you didn't lose one thing, your word.
Hmm.
Your word is the gold standard. If you say you're going to call someone the next day, call them. Even if you don't have an answer, call them. When you stop honoring your word, then every time you make a promise, people then will think about all the times you didn't promise it and they don't believe you, or they go, yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't rebuild. You cannot start a new venture and succeed. You cannot start a new initiative and succeed if you don't have your word intact. But you can lose everything else and try and start over. But with your word intact, a banker may say, you know what? We trust in you, we believe in you. Let's put it this way. If you watch Shark Tank, right?
Hmm.
So the first thing that they have to see is that an item or service that interests us? Do we see possibility?
Hmm.
That's just to get into the game to get those judges to want to invest in you.
Yeah.
But now if you get there, then the next thing and the most important thing they look at, do we believe in you, the owner,
Hmm.
the person behind the deal? Do we believe you have what it takes? And if you do anything in that presentation that automatically creates an issue of trust, they're not investing in you. How can they?
Yeah.
Because when the trust is not there, they don't believe in you.
Hmm.
That's how important trust is.
Okay. So this is interesting. I'm really glad you brought that up. Something that has come up lately, I guess, with even other guests I've been talking to and just people in my life, is that it's also okay when you're taking care of yourself to, if you say you're going to do something, it's okay to change your mind sometimes if you need to take care of yourself. How would you reconcile taking care of yourself with still being dependable and keeping your word?
Well, number one, things get in the way. We know that.
Hmm.
It's not that something got in the way that irks people. It's the fact you didn't let them know in advance
Got it. Yep.
so that they can make changes.
Hmm.
For example, salespeople, especially now with the supply chain shortage,
Hmm.
they're notorious. They are always reluctant to call a customer when they have bad news. They're afraid to lose the order, the customer may yell at them and all that. If a customer's yelling at you, number one, it's just their aggravation of what they have to go through. But think about it this way. When you promise a customer something or anybody, they in turn take that promise, assume it's going to happen, and then they make their promises based on your promise.
Hmm.
Right. So if you're selling a product, a raw material to a company, then they put it into their production cycle. They say, okay, it's going to be here. We got the other products coming. This goes on a line on Tuesday. Then all of a sudden you're delayed and all those things can't happen. That's when you have a problem. And that's when that person you promised to now loses their trust with their people because they can't, keep it going.
Yeah.
So if you got bad news or something comes in your way from honoring your commitment, you need to do two things. Number one, let people know as soon as possible. Because what it does is it allows them then to plan for it and make changes. But if you let them know after the fact, or you never even called them, forget it. It's too late then, and they probably don't even want to talk to you.
Yeah.
So let them know in advance, number one. And then number two, give them a reason why.
Yeah.
And that leads me to when I say to the audiences when I speak, what's the most powerful word in the English language? The word because. That's the reason. I can't do this because. A quick story. If you left your dog in the car by accident, or you thought you're only going to be in the store for a minute, and you had no clue that there's a big line, and you're getting one thing, and then all of a sudden you get the big line, your dog's getting a little hot in the car. You don't want to be one of these people arrested for killing your dog. All of a sudden you go to the front of the line, you ask somebody, hey, my dog's in the car. I'm really sorry, would you let me in? They may begrudgingly, give you a face or whatever, but 9 out of 10 times they'll let you in. Why? Because they can all relate and you gave them the reason.
Hmm.
But if you go to the front of the line and just cut in with no reason, well, there's no chance you might be alive after that.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
And the third thing is, so you warn them, You tell them the reason why so they understand,
Hmm.
and then you help them creatively solve the issue.
Okay.
Try and give them ideas that can help them get through this so that they can go back to their company or whatever and help them through this. And this is for everybody. It's not just for a salesperson. It's for anybody when you made a promise to someone you can't. I got a guy who's thinking of bringing me in as a senior executive. His wife's the CEO, and it's a big company. And this guy on his voicemail says, "I'll call you back within 24 hours if I don't send the police after me." But he doesn't call you back.
Oh no.
So he's breaking a promise right then. And to him, I know why he does it, because he really cares. He wants to be good to people. He wants to show them he cares. But you're not caring then.
Yeah.
It's better off if you don't even say it. And then if you can't call them back, well, then you call them back in 2 days. You're not breaking a trust then.
Yeah. Something that you hit on a little bit is that we're all just people, whether it's sales or whether, it's just in your personal life. There's still this transparency that's needed so people can relate. But when we're talking about from a scientific standpoint, can you tell us a little bit about the neuroscience of trust and what goes on inside of humans when trust exists versus when it erodes?
So we talk about three hormones on stage when we talk about how to engage people so that you can get them engaged and tracking with you. So eventually, hopefully, they'll accept your ideas.
Hmm.
And the first hormone we talk about is cortisol. Cortisol is a fight or flight hormone. So let's just do a little enactment, Brandy. How's that?
Sure.
Make us a little bit engaged, okay?
Yeah.
So, Brandy, if I'm calling you up, let's say, to sell myself as a guest on your show,
Hmm.
right? And you have a lot of people calling you up to be a guest on your show. I know that, right? So if I just call you up and I say, Brandon, this is going to be the best interview you ever had. Well, first of all, I'm setting myself up for failure right then because you're putting expectations that are not realistic for anybody.
Hmm.
But if you say this is going to be the best interview I had, and let's do it, and so you're like a little suspicious right then and there. Is that a fair statement?
Sure. Yeah.
So if you look at cortisol from 1 to 10, now cortisol you're going to have in you. All right. But the question is it low enough but high enough to where you engage and it's not pushing you away?
Ah, okay.
So if 1 to 10, one's a low end. If you're 1 and 2, you're not really being pushed away, but you have no reason to listen because you're not really engaged. 3 to 5 is where you want people to be. They're engaged, they're talking to you, and they're like getting raring to go. How can we do this? 6, something gets in the way, they're starting a little agitated. 7, they're agitated. 8, they want to get the heck out of there. They start checking out mentally or physically. And 9, 10, they can get abusive, upset with you.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, if I'm sitting there saying, yeah, I can do this, and I'm giving you it's going to be the best thing you ever had. And a couple of things happen. Number one, you start the interview and you're going, oh my God, he's the best one. Your expectations are so high. And this is the worst interview I've ever had. Your cortisol is shooting up.
Mm.
Now, let's suppose we made an appointment like we did today to be interviewed,
Hmm.
and I don't show up. Well, first of all, your cortisol is probably still at 6 or 7 at the beginning of the interview, wondering how is it going to go? Is it going to be good for your listeners and all that? You probably do that at the beginning of every show. Is that a fair statement?
Oh yeah. I get nervous.
Because it's your brand at stake. It's your show,
Hmm.
and you care about your listeners. And then all of a sudden they don't show up. Where does your cortisol go up? Does it go up?
Yeah. Oh, it definitely shoots up.
Yeah,
This has happened before, and I try to calm down.
right. But it shoots up. So now if I make you another promise, I'll be there next week. You may not give me the opportunity. Or if you do, your cortisol is still going to be up because I already left you at the altar, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And now there's a shot I'm going to do it. So you're going to be stressed out to make sure I show up. And then if I do show up, you're still going to be overly stressed to see if it's a good interview. And the bottom line is, if you go into an interview feeling that stressed, no matter how good you are, it still comes out somehow.
Hmm.
That's the one hormone we link to the concept of trust.
Okay.
And the other hormone is this. There's two other, oxytocin and dopamine. Oxytocin is a love and trust hormone.
Yeah.
So when we bring two people up on stage and we show them how one question can change the whole dynamic of a cell in the brain and how the brain can switch immediately and become engaged, And the question will ask the person who's playing the salesperson, just say, hey, what are the three biggest challenges you're having? That one question automatically changes the whole hormone makeup in someone's brain,
Hmm.
because it takes the emphasis off. Now they stop worrying about what you're trying to sell them. Their fear goes down, and now they think about what they want to do, which is really important to them, and they're engaged. And so now all of a sudden you're asking what are the three biggest challenges, or what are the three things they want to accomplish. Now they may start giving you those three things. Well, they wouldn't have given it to you if they didn't start trusting you. And
Yeah.
they started trusting you because you started making the conversation about them, not about you. So then the oxytocin gets released just a little bit because trust is earned.
Hmm.
They give you those three things, and then they start feeling better about the conversation because it's about them, not about you. So their dopamine's released. Dopamine's to feel good.
Hmm.
But dopamine only rides with oxytocin. If they don't trust you, they're not feeling good.
Okay. Listeners, we're talking to Ron Karr, public speaker, sales and leadership expert, and author who is telling us about the importance of trust and dependability in relationships. His new book is called The Velocity Mindset. I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. It's time for a little behind-the-scenes sneak peek into one of the process changes we made in the last year so I can spend more time dependably hanging out with you online rather than dealing with the time suck that is manually posting in all the places we hang out together. Here at Human Amplified, we partner with SmarterQ to keep showing up consistently with you on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. It's so simple. SmarterQ gives you the ability to categorize the type of content you like to post, visually lay it out on a calendar, and then queue items that you know you have coming up and want to share. Based on what's next in the queue that corresponds to the current category in your posting plan, SmarterQ automatically publishes your posts to all the social networks you've designated. That means you only have to write the post once and be done. And if you want to post a one-off spontaneous Instagram story or tweet about the latest chaos in the world, you can still totally do that. But you have more quality time to interact with your friends and followers because you're not spending your time manually publishing to all the places. We love it. Give it a try today. Go to humanamplified.com/smarterq to sign up for your 30-day free trial. Now, back to the show. We're speaking with Ron Karr, public speaker, sales and leadership expert, and author whose newest book is called The Velocity Mindset. This next segment, Ron dives deep into the communication aspect of relationships and getting out of a victim mentality to move forward. This is really interesting, and it makes sense. And it seems like, sometimes you don't always know who you're talking to or trying to engage with, even if you're creating new relationships in whatever interaction. And if that person has had a traumatic past or has PTSD or something like that, it seems like the hormones would be different. Would they not react like with more cortisol if...
In certain things, they may react if it triggers them. If it triggers them to where they were when they were younger and saying, oh my God, like I get triggered, if someone blows up on me unexpectedly,
Yeah.
could have just said, hey, why did you do this or whatever. That could trigger me to go back. But after many years of therapy, I've learned how to deal with that.
Yeah.
But yes, we could be triggered. And we are all triggered. You begin into a relationship with somebody, you're doing nothing but triggering each other because you get used to the same conversation. You don't even need to be there. Just hit the play button on the tape recorder. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm dating myself when I say tape recorder. But, we trigger each other. And the moment we say something, especially if you've been with somebody for a long time, it triggers them about something you don't like about that person or whatever. And the relationship will always stay fresh if you're always acting empathetic and thinking ahead. Am I triggering somebody? Am I creating an environment that's safe for them to want to talk? I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
So my ex-wife and I, we're good friends today. And, marriage just didn't work, okay? But we're great friends and we support our daughter and all that. And we celebrate some holidays together.
Okay.
When I be traveling on the road for 2 weeks or whatever, I'm not a talkative guy when I get home. I'm like talked out.
Yeah.
But my ex-wife loves to talk. And she would talk about everything that happened for the last 2 weeks. And I'm exhausted. And I look at her and go, seriously, What about me? And then obviously that conversation didn't go well because she took it as me rejecting her,
Hmm.
which I was not doing. So I'm flying home one day and I'm saying, well, you teach the stuff. You teach that it doesn't take two to change a relationship or a conversation. It only takes one. If you don't like the reaction, change the action. What are you going to do differently?
Okay.
And that's the premise of the velocity mindset, which came out in May. Is what would the world look like if everybody acted like a leader, meaning in control of their destiny, and not as a victim of circumstance?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I decided that I was not going to reject her because I'm planning ahead. I have to create the right environment. I know how she can feel rejected, be triggered.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to interrupt her. And I get home, we sit down for dinner, and she goes, and I felt like I was sitting on my hands, sitting on my hands. And I put in a couple, really? Oh, yeah. And I can't say I'm listening 100%, but I'm listening a little bit. But miraculously, what seemed like 10 minutes later, but it wasn't, it was only like 30 seconds, she was no longer rejected. And it allowed her to have empathy for me. And she looked at me and she goes, "You're really tired." I go, "Yeah." You know what? We can talk about this later.
Oh.
So what changed? Me recognizing that if I'm going to be an influencer,
Hmm.
I got to have some empathy. I got to create a safe environment for her to want to talk to. And when I did that, she in turn had empathy for me.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. That was really helpful. I think you mentioned the victim mentality or being a victim. How can someone know if they have a victim mentality?
The first thing you're thinking about is, why is this always happening to me? Or someone says only the 1% get this complication. I'm the 1% guy, which I've said. That's a victim mentality.
Okay.
If you're always saying, if anything can go wrong, it's me. Or something does go wrong, something happens, and all you think about is how it's hurting you, but you're not understanding why it happened.
Hmm.
One of the premises in the book we say is when something goes wrong, stop blaming other people. That's what victim mentalities do. They blame others or they blame certain situations. Real leaders, I'm not talking about whether you have a manager's position or you're an owner or whatever, it's anybody in life. Real leaders, when something doesn't go right, the first thing they do is they don't blame anybody, they don't blame circumstances. The first thing they do is they ask themselves, what could I do differently? Just like I did when I was coming home for that second time. What could I do differently? So I'll give you an example of how it works. So my first sales job in 1980, boy, am I dating myself, was selling copiers. 1980 was a revolution in the copier industry because that's when they were going from the wet liquid toner that got all the clothes to a dry bond toner, simple, clean, switch it out, and they seduced me with the crispness of the copies.
Yeah.
15 beautiful copies a minute. Where's the collator? Oh, don't worry about it. Be here in 6 months. Where's the duplicator? 6 months. They never came. So for the next 4 months, first 4 months, I couldn't sell a copy to save my life. I'd be going in the doors and I'd say, "Hey, I sell copiers." "Well, can you do it? The Xerox does on the third floor, duplicate, collate." "No. When you can, come back to me." Well, after the door hit me in the butt so many times and my butt was a little sore and I didn't make a dime,
Hmm.
I decided something has to happen. So I took a pause. Think about this, Brandy. Sometimes to gain velocity, you need to pause, stop,
Hmm.
because what you're doing is not working.
That makes sense.
So for me, the pause was a board meeting with myself. It was taking me, myself, and I to the diner in New Jersey. That's where you go. And I said, "Okay, what's wrong?" "I'm not selling anything." "Okay. What's the conversation you're having?" "Copies. What happens?" They compare me to Xerox. Now, in my previous book, Lead, Seller, Get Out of the Way, the one distinction we made is don't compete, create.
Okay.
What I mean by that is if you really want to sell an idea or anything to a customer or to a family member, whoever, don't compete with anybody else or any other product because that's a zero sum game. That's when you go into price discounts and everything.
Hmm.
Find out the gaps that they're having and fill those gaps, and they'll come to you
Okay.
because they don't have a solution for those right now.
Yeah.
Right? So when I asked myself in the diner, what am I really selling? I said communication vehicle. So let me have a conversation on that. So in the next call, I went in and I said to the office manager, "Would you agree with me that a copy is nothing more than a communication vehicle?" And she goes, "Absolutely." I said, well, when it comes to that, what do you think the biggest challenge is? And Brandy was like, she was all of a sudden in a therapist's office, laying on a couch. She goes, let me tell you, Joe or Sally has to make one copy on the first floor. They get up, talk to everybody, go up the staircase to the third floor. Then they have to wait online behind all these big jobs to make their one copy.
Mm.
Then they make it, come back, chit chat with everybody else. By the time they're done, it could take 2 hours.
Oh,
I
man.
said, wow, that's a lot of time. How often does that happen? She goes, try the equivalent of 2 full-time employees. Like, well, you want them back? She goes, how are you going to get them back for me? It goes, simple. I'm not competing with the Xerox machine on the third floor. It's a great machine. Keep it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm here to fill your gaps. Put one of my machines on every floor. They're inexpensive enough. They'll take care of all your 1 and 2 copies, and you'll get back those 2 full-time employees. I sold 3 copiers that day.
Wow. Okay.
And I started selling multiple copiers after that on each deal when I realized I was having the wrong conversation.
Mm.
So I could have easily sit there and said, hey, I blame my company. They promised me in 6 months it's not happening. I could have easily blamed the customers because they don't know what the hell they're doing. But at the end of the day, I went to what could I do differently? If I don't like the reaction, how can I create a different action?
Yeah.
That's why you take a pause. That's why you stop to gain velocity. And that's how you act, not in a victim mentality. It's what could I do differently?
Yeah.
And Brandy, what would the whole world look like if everybody lived their lives that way?
I think it would be pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I like that you said, you realized you were having the wrong conversation, so you changed the conversation. When a person realizes that they're in a victim mentality and they've got these scripts playing through their head, like, why does this always happen to me? How do they change that conversation? How do they intentionally go about doing it?
That's a good question. I guess there's a few ways you can do it. The way that I always do it is, it's the thing we talk about in the book is stories. We create stories.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens to us. Somebody says something to us. We create a story.
Mm-hmm.
So I can create the victim story. But stories are fueled by emotion. Now, if the story is fueling you and it's pushing you forward, great, keep doing it. But if it's not serving you well, then you have to realize that at the end of the day, only you can stop that. And here's the good news, Brandy. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
You wrote that story, which means you could change it. It's your story.
Mm.
That's all it is. It's a story.
Okay. I like that. I can see somebody who's stuck there being like, I can't change it. I don't know how to change it. This is reality. There's no getting out of this.
So let's take that statement.
Yeah.
I can't change it. I can't get out of it. That's a story you just told yourself.
Okay.
Now, if you allow it to keep going, you're going to believe it.
And you won't get out of it. Yeah.
Well, you won't, because you're not looking to do anything different. You're already owning it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's a fait accompli. So you're acting as a victim.
Yeah.
But instead of saying, I can't get out of it, I want you to say, what can I do differently? And you'll be amazed at how energized you'll become. Because when you're sitting there saying, I can't get out of it, you deplete yourself of all energy.
Mm.
Being a victim robs you of your energy.
Yeah.
But when you sit there and saying, okay, every action creates a reaction, it's neutral. I'm not making a story about this. It's just the world. It's the physics. Every action creates a reaction.
Yeah.
You don't like the reaction, change the action. So when you remove the negative emotion around what's going on, it immediately frees you to say, okay, what could I do differently? And when you are freed like that, it's amazing what you come up with.
Yeah. Do you have an example of a time when you have been in that victim mentality and
Well, that's what I did with my ex-wife.
Okay.
That was a victim. I'm coming home. All of a sudden, she's like yelling at me. She wasn't yelling at me. She was doing because I rejected her. When I was able to take the emotion away from that and see what it was,
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, what could I do differently? Let her talk.
Okay.
Don't reject her. Don't do anything that she can create her own story of being rejected. See, we all create stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But that's what a leader does. They think ahead to create a safe environment. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
I'm in the CEO's office of this company, and a production supervisor comes storming in. Damn person's on a cell phone. So what did he do? I told him to get off the damn cell phone. What did he do? He said, why? Everybody else is on a cell phone. What did you do? I yelled at him to get off the damn cell phone and stormed away. I said, how well did that serve you? So along the lines, if you don't like the reaction, change the action.
Mm-hmm.
What do we know about this person? He wants to be a master welder. What do you need? Great quality and timeliness. How's his quality? Perfect. We love him. How's his timeliness? He's 20 minutes late on his job and is delaying everybody else.
Mm.
Why don't you go back there and have a different conversation saying, hey, you want to be a master welder? He goes, yeah. Well, you know you need quality and your quality is phenomenal. That's why we love you. Your timeliness, well, you're 20 minutes behind on this job. What do you think we can do to get you back on track so at the end of the day, you don't lose any time in getting to be a master welder? And miraculously, the person started coming up with his own ideas on what he can do to get back on time.
Mm-hmm.
And Brandy, the concept of the cell phone never even came up.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, let's replay it. The first time he did it, attacking the person on the cell phone. This goes, are you winning the battle or the war? He created the battle into the war, cell phone, when that wasn't the issue. He wanted to win the war was to make the guy more productive. And he wasn't having a conversation on that. So all of a sudden he comes storming up to that person. And the person, anytime someone sees a boss coming over, it's either really good, which usually doesn't happen, it's really bad.
Mm-hmm.
He's smoking. What's that employee going to do? They already told themselves a story. It's gaining energy. They start protecting themselves. And then all of a sudden you got two people just going like this, just going at it.
Yeah.
When instead the person who wants to influence the second time acted like a leader, anticipated what the person's likely to respond to, like I did with my ex-wife,
Mm-hmm.
creates a safe environment for that person to want to talk. How? By taking the issue off the cell phone and what was important for that person, what they wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
And when that happened, they got into a great conversation.
Yeah.
It doesn't take two people to do that, Branding. That's the secret. It only takes one. The question for your listeners, are you the one? Are you acting like a leader?
Yeah. Okay. You have mentioned the velocity mindset. That is your latest book that came out in May. What is the velocity mindset? Can you give us a little overview?
Well, everything we talked about is part of the velocity mindset. But if I ask you when you hear the word velocity, Branding, what is the first word that comes to your mind?
I guess motion.
Yeah, a lot of people say speed, momentum, motion. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's all you're thinking about, you're going to have burnout. I moved to Florida and I have I thought I had a new cleaning lady. Nice lady. Did a great job the first time.
Mm-hmm.
She was in my house. She knows what it looks like. There's a house down the street similar to mine with a similar address. My friends have gone to that house by accident. I was expecting her to be here yesterday. I'm planning it in between my Zoom interviews and everything. And she doesn't call, she doesn't show up. And finally at 4:00, she calls me and she goes, I was at your house, you weren't home, so I cleaned it. I said, you weren't here. She goes, I just cleaned it. I said, ma'am, you were not here.
Oh, no.
And she goes, well, I need to get paid. I said, well, okay, but you didn't clean my house. She cleaned somebody else's house.
Oh, no.
Who left the door open by accident and wasn't expecting them.
I wonder what happened when they came home and their house was clean.
So in the book, we call that task versus purpose.
Okay.
She didn't care where she was. She didn't keep, the purpose was to clean the right house. But because she was so task driven, any house will do. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
What we're saying in the velocity mindset is you need one thing besides speed to have velocity. You need direction. The end result. Okay. Versus task. Doing a task for a task. All she was doing the task of cleaning a house. She didn't care if she was at the right house. She didn't care. She didn't think about why is he not home? And I know he's home. His office is here. Why is this happening? I don't. So at the end of the day, because she was so task driven, she was oblivious to everything else. And now she spent a lot of time, but was it worth it to her?
Yeah.
So when we're task driven, we're doing a lot of things and we don't have time for ourselves. But at the end of the day, how many times did we say to ourselves, but what did I really do?
Mm-hmm.
How did I move the needle forward? Velocity is about keeping you on track. Velocity is making sure that you're only doing the tasks that make sense to where you want to go. So the definition of velocity is speed with direction.
Okay.
If you don't have that end result in mind to make sure you're making the right decisions and doing the right actions, then any road will get there. And you might be cleaning someone else's house metaphorically and not cleaning the right house. And then at the end of the day, you ask yourself, well, how come I didn't get to where I wanted to be?
Yeah. So speed and direction.
Yes.
Say you're moving along in a direction and then all of a sudden an obstacle comes up, a wall comes up. How do you handle that? And I sort of feel like this is related to changing the conversation, but how is that connected?
Well, the end result has to be the right result that you're after, and you have to be passionate. You really want it. So let's talk about a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
A salesperson would say to me, "Yeah, I'm going to meet this new prospect. I've been after him for a long time." I said, "Great. What's your goal for the call?" "I want to close the deal." I said, "Well, wait a second. What's your sales cycle?" "Well, it usually takes 5 calls." "What call is this?" "It's the first call." So is that really the right end result you're going after? Because if all you're doing is going into that first call to close the deal, you're not even asking any questions. You're telling them all the reasons why they should buy from you, and you're probably not going to see them again.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're talking about. So what should be the right goal? The right goal, if it's the first call in a 5 call sales cycle, the first call should be to qualify them as the ideal customer. It's worth your time. And then to identify with that person what the path forward is.
Okay.
And then that's going to dictate your actions. If you're going to identify if they're the right person for you in the right account, you got to ask them questions, not talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
You got to ask them questions about what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to prevent and all that good stuff. You have to see if that's in your sweet spot, if that's what you want to do. And if it is, then together create a path forward. That's velocity.
Okay. I know a lot of times when we're talking about sales, and you mentioned this earlier, that sometimes people have a negative connotation of that. So I would just like to talk a little bit about how do acceptance and gentleness fit into this process versus like force and persistence? Not just the process of sales, but how does that fit into accomplishing your dreams and keeping that forward motion?
Couple things. When I'm on stage, I said, how many of you can't, and you have to make the purchase decision, how many of you can't wait to meet that next salesperson who is going to puke on you? People who have the knowledge about everything, that's puke. Who's going to puke on you all the 20 reasons why you should buy for them, of which 18 do not speak to you at all. How many of you can't wait for that? And that one hand goes up. But then when I ask, if you have to make an important decision, how many of you would value the assistance of someone who's going to help you make the right decision for you? All the hands go up. So at the end of the day, it's about the customer, not about you. So if you want to reduce resistance, have them talk about where they're going. Have them talk about what's stopping them from getting there. Have them identify the gaps. And then only talk about the 1, 2, or 3 things you and your product can do for them that's going to help them fill in the gaps they just talked to you about. If you don't, you're going to be wasting a lot of time and you probably won't get the business.
Yeah. And does this translate into personal relationships at all?
Yeah, it's the same thing. If you look, we all have ideas. We all want people to do what we want to do. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's your best pitch? Why should someone want to do it in your family?
Yeah.
What's in it for them?
Yeah.
You want to understand the best way to gain velocity and influence. Always ask yourself the WIIFM. What's in it for them?
Mm. Ron, I've really enjoyed this. I do want to ask you, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think is important to say?
My whole thing with clients was always helping them get to where they want to be in the fastest way possible. But as I was down for those 3 years with those laying back surgeries and I couldn't move, almost 4 back surgeries and a couple others. I was 57 at that time. And I said, so you review your life, when you're like that. And you look at your successes, and I've had some really great successes. But I've also had situations where I didn't get to what was on my bucket list. And when I asked myself why, it was the stories that held me back. Everything we just talked about, Brandy.
Mm. Okay.
But I was 57 and I'm going, my God, I've always talked about velocity, but now it's hit me right in the eyes because, I'm on the back 9 in my life. if I really want to accomplish those things, I've got to change those stories so I can really get there. So it gave me renewed passion and energy for what I want to do on stage. It was always about sales and leadership. I still do that analogy because this affects that.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm on a mission, a renewed mission that gave me renewed life in my career, which is to help people get to where they want. So at the end of a period, at the end of the quota year, at the end of a lifetime, whenever it is, no one is ever looking back in their lives and saying, I failed because I didn't get to where I wanted to be. I want people to have fulfillment at the end of a given period of time so they can go out feeling good about themselves.
Mm.
That's what I live for. And that's my renewed passion on stage.
Well, that is absolutely amazing. And Ron, I love it. Just thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and just thank you.
Can I give your listeners something to a free thing that they can do?
Oh, absolutely. And I do want to make sure that all of your website, your book, all of that stuff goes into the show notes for them to check out. Give us those.
So they go to velocitymindset.com. Velocitymindset.com. 8 is a free leadership assessment. Remember, leadership is everybody in life, not just to give a title. Take that. It's a short 5-question survey. The 5 most important things you need to think of for the velocity mindset to lead your life with it. And you make your own grade, but then it also comes with tips and best practices and how you can move forward in all those areas. That's free of charge. We also ask for your email address only for one reason. We come out with videos every Friday on Velocity. So we want to keep you in the conversation. So you just sign up free of charge for that. And then there's a link to go to Amazon to get the book, The Velocity Mindset, in any format that you want. So the link's there and you can get it all right there in one page, velocitymindset.com.
Okay. Perfect. velocitymindset.com. It'll all be there for you guys in the show notes, so be sure to go check that out. And Ron, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and learn more at humanamplified.com. Support for this podcast comes from SmarterQ. Build trust, dependability, and forward motion through consistent communication on all your socials. Start your 30-day free trial now at humanamplified.com/SmarterQ.